Welcome back, once again, adventurers, to Let's Play ChäoS Child. In the last episode, Takuru had a nice evening meal with Kurusu, Sakuma, Yuto, and Yui at his old haunts at Aoba Clinic. Very much like old times. But, yeah. After a certain point, things kind of shook a sharp turn. And, of course, by sharp turn, it was the news that, it was the news that Uki Yamazoe, the girl who was quote-unquote rescued from the underground facility beneath AH Tokyo General Hospital, has vanished from where she was being, well, cared for at Frisia Investigations. And lo and behold, we finally know what Uki's gigolomaniac ability is. She basically has the power to project false memories and or experiences into other people's dead spots. Kind of like the one that Momose Katsuko... I always keep forgetting her name. Her first name is Katsuko. But anyway, Momose had a very different experience to the one that Mio and Shinjo had. But long story short, Uki is missing. But we do know of one location of where she might be, which is said facility that we retrieved her from. Problem is that she's going to be in for a bit of a shock because it's not really there anymore. But it is the only place where she would go to.
まさかそんな。
ふきちゃんたらね、あそこへ返してくれの一点張りだったのよ。
Yeah, because believe it or not, Takuru, that facility where Senri Minamisawa was being experimented on, as well as countless others, that is the only home that Uki knew of, so to speak.
あんな地獄みたいな場所に一体なんで？
Not to Uki, it wasn't.
さてな、とにかく厄介なことになる前に取り戻さないとな。
Yeah, because if the people running the facility ever got her back before we did, that would be a huge problem for Uki as well as us. And so, for the third time,
タクル、ねえタクル。
for the third time, it's back here. And, surprise, surprise, Kurusu apparently knew of the facility that was being used beneath this hospital all this time.
し、見つかったらどうするんだよ。
An hour had passed since we first spoken to Momose at Frisia. Kurusu and I were hiding in behind some plants near AH Tokyo General.
新庄さんたちに任せないとダメよ。私たちみたいな素人が出しゃばったりしたら。
Shinjo tried and failed, and even Momose isn't able to deal with Uki. But you'd be surprised at what an amateur can accomplish.
山添ウキって子は僕が見つけて青葉寮へ連れて帰る。
どうして？
彼女 今の久野里さんには渡せない。
That's a good enough reason for me. I was gritting my teeth hard in anger.
タクル
Yeah. She wasn't joking about wanting to examine the brains of Hanai Arimura as well as Takuru himself, in spite of what she said to Shinjo earlier. Afterward, Shinjo, Mimosa, and Kunosato had started to come up with a plan to get inside the basement of the hospital. Of course, they weren't going to let us come along. We were told to go home, and at first that was my plan. But then things changed. Kunosato said she wasn't sending Uki Yamazoe to an orphanage, but to a research center she was affiliated with. She said they were going to research her power there. But Kunosato had treated not only Arimura but also little Uki as nothing more than guinea pigs. Her hatred of Gigolomaniacs certainly runs deep, and I heard her use the word capture many times.
あの子は苦しい実験から解放されて、やっと地下から出られたっていうのに。
Was Kunosato going to send her right back to the same old life she had experienced before? Just imagining it terrified me, and it made me come to a decision. Reckless and insane though it may be, I would save her.
もしここであの子を見放したら、また同じことの繰り返しだ。またこの場所で誰かを見捨てることになってしまう。
Pretty sure that Serica would have told you about how we were acquainted with Senri's name.
昔僕はクルスの親友だった南沢千里を見捨てて逃げた。それを今でも後悔してる。
Yeah, well, it's out in the open now.
あの山添って子も実験の犠牲者だ。だから今度こそ僕は助けたい。そんなことくらいで南沢千里が許してくれるとは思わないけど、でも助けたいんだ。
A salve to one's conscience. But it's all we have. So now you know, Kurusu, Takuru Miyashiro's resolve. Kurusu's voice choked up. She must have been remembering what happened to her best friend.
タクルあのね
And still she tries to go down the rational route, when the path before us is anything but rational.
本当は千里は
彼女のこと何か知ってるのか？おい、クルス。
ごめんなさい、気が動転してしまって。千里はね、渋谷地震で死んだの。あなたのせいじゃないわ、絶対に違う。
I think we're coming at this from two different angles, Kurusu. Although then again, the earthquake did happen in 2009. But then again, there was that encounter. that encounter on that fateful night.
クルス。
だからタクルが責任を感じ続ける必要なんてないの。忘れていいのよね。
I don't think we can, because I have a pretty good idea that Senri's not dead. Kurusu looked down at her feet. When she did, her hair covered her eyes, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking.
今、クルスは何を言いかけて、何を言いやめたんだろう。
Exactly what was it? We might never know. Just as I was about to ask, I heard soft footsteps.
来た。
Momozo's van was in the same alley where she picked us up before. They'd been watching the hospital for a while now. I saw two shadows that probably belonged to Shinjo and Kunasato leave the van and run onto the grounds.
クルス、向こうが動いた。大丈夫か？いけるか？
Good answer, because you don't really have a choice now. Neither of us do. I tapped her on the shoulder and she looked up. That's why they called her the Empress of Heikyo Academy. There was no trace of the sadness that had been there a moment ago.
ごめんね。ちょっと千里を思い出しちゃって。でももう平気よ。
本当はここで待っててもらいたいんだけど。
But I couldn't wheel boot on my own. I needed a partner, no matter what. Yeah. Kurusu is the only candidate, because we tried to reel boot using anyone else's dead spots. They're gonna know what's up.
何言ってるの。あなたのことを心配しながら待ってるなんて、こっちからお断りよ。
だと思った。
Reverse psychology. Then again, we do need her. We followed Shinjo and Kunasato from a distance. Here we go again. A moment later, they had pressed themselves up against the wall near the rear emergency entrance. Even from a distance, I could tell it was more heavily secured than before. They already had 2 break-ins. The lock seemed to be a newer and sturdier model. But Shinjo must have already had the key, because he took something out of his pocket and started to put it in the lock.
あそこから入るつもりだな。
Alright then. I quickly created an image in my mind. I looked at the key-like object he was holding and envisioned it flying away. Uh-oh.
やっぱりもっと訓練しとくんだった。
The more I started to panic, the more I lost focus. I couldn't make the delusion clear in my mind.
くそ。
Yeah, that was a long shot.
大丈夫だ。落ち着け。よし、見えた。
I could see the D-sword floating in front of me.
クルス、ちょっと脳を使わせてもらうな。
どうぞ。っていうのもなんか変だけど。
Point taken. I imagined the delusion I'd come up with going inside Kurusu, Shinjo, and Kunisato's minds. Mio is totally gonna know what's up. Kurusu gasped a little. She must have felt something. The delusion was shared between us, and instantly the real boot was complete. Clang. The The metallic object in Shinjo's hand rolled away and hit the ground with a clang. Then I heard the two of them gasp. The key rolled along the ground in a very unnatural way until it rolled down into a sewer made of grate. Yeah, they're gonna be pissed. They're going to be livid, just like I'd imagined. I imagined something different here.
バカ、隠れてたくる。
Just as I was about to make a victory pose, Kurusu grabbed my hand and pulled me back. Then she dragged me down onto the ground.
悪い。
調子に乗らないの。これだから私がついてないとダメなのよ。
Her hand was shaking a little. She was probably still scared of my power, no matter how many times she saw it. That was how most people would react. I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her hand in return. Then I let her go and looked over at Shinjo and Kunasato. The two of them whispered to each other, and then silently headed back toward the van.
今だ。
We kept low as we headed for the emergency entrance. When we reached the door, I turned round toward Kurusu. She caught up a moment later, but her breathing was a little heavy.
すまない。ちょっと早かった。
こっちこそごめん。もっと運動が得意ならよかったんだけど。鍵開けられるの？
多分。クルス、もう一回。いや、何回かやるよ。悪いけど。
Yeah, we're gonna need to do that.
構わないわ。そのために来てるんだから。
I stared at the door. The lock was stronger than before, probably because of the time we'd broken in. All that concentration. I imagined the lock flipping and the door opening. There was a heavy click and the door opened like I'd imagined. So far, so good. Gonna need all our wits about us. Thanks to my power, we were able to make it inside with no trouble. Yet. I remembered the route to the room where we found Uki, so we headed there. But as we walked through the darkness, I saw that Kurusu was acting a little strange. Yeah, this hospital. Not what it seems.
大丈夫か？
実はちょっと閉所恐怖症がね。でも平気。気にしないで。
平気って、すごい汗だぞ。
That's not good. And then I realized something.
まさか、傷が痛むのか？
Oh, of all the times. Of course she's still injured. She seemed like she was okay, but it had been a really bad injury. It couldn't have fully healed up by now. Oh dear.
おい、クルス。
平気だから。ほら、急ぎましょう。
Not so sure about that myself. And sadly, we have no time to worry at this moment in time. So on we go. She pushed me onward before I could stop.
もうちょっとだ。あと少しで例の部屋だから我慢してくれ。
question is she still there?
ええ。
That's right. It was right around this corner. And lo and behold, there she is, Uki Yamazoe, crying for the patients who are no longer there, crying for the home that never truly was. Suddenly we heard a voice sobbing in the darkness. Kurusu and I almost leapt into each other's arms. Hate to break it to you, Uki, but Momose was telling the truth. The voice of a little girl. Yeah, we know.
タクル、この声。
It's her. Sorry, I didn't get to my microphone in time. Whoops. Was it a ghost? No, it's not a ghost. That was dumb. Which meant it had to be the obvious choice. Kurusu and I nodded, then stepped toward the direction of the room. The now empty room. Yeah, they're gone. Where they've gone to, we don't know. Just like Shinjo had said, the room was completely empty. They took everything, including the kitchen sinks. The beds and the patients that had been confined here were all gone. It was just an empty room. And an entirely empty place. The monitors, the technology, it's all been cleared out. And standing in the middle of the empty room was a crying Uki Yamazoe. Who now has nowhere to go and no one else to turn to. How long had she been there? She was crying like a child who had lost their mother, which, in all fairness, those patients were her only family.
いない。誰もいない。誰か返事して。
Kurusu couldn't bear to watch. She ran over and gave the girl a big hug. Soon, Kurusu was crying too.
今までよく頑張ったね。でももういいの。だからお家へ帰ろうね。
But Uki must not have heard her, because she just stood there, crying silently, for a very long, long time. The whole time, there was nothing I could do but watch. Unfortunately, breaking Uki Yamazoe back into reality is going to be easier said than done.
大丈夫？変わりましょうか、タクル。
いいよ。もう目の前だから。
Getting her out of the hospital, however, is a very different matter. It's only mildly fatiguing. Back to the dorm we go. Uki in hand. When we finally made it back to Aoba dorm, I took Uki off my back and put her on the sofa. Whether or not she'll stay here is another matter entirely as well. And then I lay flat on the floor with my arms and legs stretched out. Yeah, it is pathetic. It is definitely how I would say. She wasn't even that heavy. I was just out of shape.
だから変わるって言ったのに。
But then again, you have your own health to worry about.
運動音痴に任せたら落っことすかもしれないだろ。
Probably not the... Yeah. You know what?
失礼ね。そこまで言われるほどひどくないわ。それに、タクルよりマシだと思うんですけど。
Then again, Takuru isn't the one who has a stab wound in his chest. Kurusu's eyes were red-rimmed. Her face was red from when she tried to rub away the tears. She must have been embarrassed by it because she turned away from me and said something mean.
はいはい、わかったよ。その子のこと、父さんに。
あ、うん、そうね。
After Kurusu left to get him, I lifted my tired body off the floor and onto the sofa. Well, Uki has stopped crying. Or maybe not. As I expected, Uki hated the idea of leaving the basement. But after Kurusu's fervent attempts at persuasions, and my own insistence that nobody was coming back to the basement, she'd finally clung to Kurusu and started to break down. And as I carried her on my back, she'd gotten tired and fallen asleep, so she is resting. That's good. Though things aren't going to be quite so cozy when she wakes up.
この子の家族は一体どうしたんだろう。本当の家は、学校は。
Hate to say it, Takuru, but I think she was pretty much raised in that facility. I hadn't had a chance to look the first time we'd gone into the basement, and that data was probably long gone by now. That it is.
父さん、今上がってくるって。
うん。
Might as well get this over with then. Kurusu sat next to Uki on the sofa and softly stroked her hair.
この子、捜索願いとか出てないのかしら。
I sincerely doubt it.
新庄さんの話だと、今のところ該当するデータはないって。
Yeah, that's not surprising.
そう。
やっぱり渋谷地震のせいかもしれないな。
Maybe or maybe not. After the earthquake, more data on missing persons and casualties had gone missing than you could imagine. Funny that, how very convenient. And to top that off, this year had seen the largest solar storm in history affect all kinds of electronic devices. Very elaborate solar display here. Shibuya hadn't been hit that hard, but a lot of data in other regions had been lost.
分かってるのは名前だけ。 か。せめて手がかりでも持っていればいいんだけど。
Perhaps he does, but we're probably not going to find it anytime soon.
ののね、タクル兄？
And it's Yui. And Yuzo, of
何かあっ
course.
たの？
The door opened. Yui and Yuto peeked inside.
しえ？
The two of them froze next to the door. Yeah, I didn't quite introduce them to Uki yet.
まだ寝てなかったの、二人とも。寝ようと思ってたら、のの姉たちの声が聞こえたから。大丈夫？また喧嘩とかしてない？
No, not this time, at least. Kurusu and I looked at each other without thinking.
大丈夫よ。私たち喧嘩なんてしてないから。
Yeah, believe it or not, she's telling the truth.
本当？だったらいいんだけど。
Suddenly, Yui stopped. She saw the girl sleeping on the sofa, and her eyes went wide. I thought that she was just surprised to see a strange girl sleeping on the sofa, but...
ウキちゃん？
Wait. Back up 1 second. You know her? She said something we never expected. Yeah. There's that red string of coincidence again.
どうしてウキちゃんがここに？
How to explain this without sounding completely crazy? No, I can't think of anything.
ゆい、知ってるの？この子のこと。うん、多分。あ、でも待って、そんなはず。
We've already seen enough impossibilities already, so we need to know. Yui walked over to the sofa and sat down next to Kurusu. And then she stared at Uki Yamazoe.
ごめん、私の勘違いかも。
No, you know who she is.
いや、勘違いじゃない。確かにこの子はウキって名前で。
だっておかしいよ。昔のままの姿なんて。そんなの絶対に変。
Oh, okay. Well, to be fair, there is a certain condition where certain people don't really grow. I mean, they still age, but they don't grow. However, that isn't the case with Uki Yamazoe here. She looks as if, she looks to Yui as if she hasn't aged a single day. Yeah, add that to the pile of mysteries we still haven't unraveled yet.
昔のままって？ウキちゃん、私のクラスメートだったんだよ。小学校2年の時の。
And the next morning,
もう一度整理するぞ。名前は山添雨季。年齢は優衣と一緒だから13もしくは14歳。
Trying to explain this to Sakuma of all people is definitely not the route I was expecting to go down, but
うん。
Dad was filling out what looked like a medical chart on his computer.
小学校2年の時に優衣と同じクラスだった。だが渋谷地震の少し前から学校に来なくなり、その後どうなったかは優衣も知らない。
Ah. So she wasn't raised, well, she was kind of raised, but not really in the facility, after all.
そう。
Good to know.
で、彼女はその頃、つまり6年前と見た目が全く変わってないと優衣は言うんだな。
6 years, and her appearance is still the same. Yeah, normally you would chalk this off as an inconsistency, but something tells me in my bones that Yui isn't lying.
うん。絶対に変わってないと思う。
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Medically speaking, it should be impossible. And even Yui herself came to that conclusion. And yet we have a scientific anomaly on our hands. But, yeah.
一応証拠も見つけてきたんだ。
Pray tell. Yui showed us the photo.
Huh?
It was a class photo from her school. I could see a young Yui in a row of children. And in the front row, next to the teacher, I saw Uki.
これ
どう思うよ、タクル。
It's not a doctored photo. I can tell you that much.
他人の空にっていう感じじゃないの？
No, it's the hair, the spectacles, everything. And there is Yui over there. But oddly enough, everyone else has smiles, but Uki alone has a very somber expression on her face.
ウキちゃん本人だよね。やっぱり。
となると、成長ホルモンの異常かな。
That would be the logical choice. But we're not exactly dealing with logic here.
みんな、ウキちゃんが起きたわよ。
Well, at least with Yui on our corner, we might finally get somewhere with Uki. Yay!
本当？
Chalk that as a victory for us if it
おう、
works.
連れてきてくれ。
ちょっと父さん。
ん？
おうじゃないわ。ウキちゃんの前でそんな声出しちゃダメよ。もっと優しく。
これで普通の声なんだがな。
いいから優しくする。
Think we better let Yui handle this one.
はい。
Dad glared at her and started mumbling about how he hadn't raised her to be like this again. Gripe, gripe.
ウキちゃん、さ、入って。
After a long pause, a small girl entered the room, trembling. Kurusu took her hand and walked her over to a chair and then sat her down.
ウキちゃん、おはよ
She flinched away from Yui's cheerful voice.
う。わからないよね。6年前の私しか知らないもんね。
Yui took out the class photo and pointed to herself.
ほら、これ私だよ。立花ゆい、覚えてる？立花ゆいさん。
Yuki looked at the girl in the photo, then at Yui. Then she gave a little start of surprise.
思い出してくれた？はい。お久しぶりです。
Yeah, time is definitely an interesting way of phrasing it there, but, well, looks like Yui is the key to getting Uki to open up, which is what we
もう
need.
同級生なんだから敬語とかやめてよ。でも
Dad typed something else into his computer as he watched them. I slurred my words there. Apologies.
決まりだな。
そうだね。
There was no question of it now. Uki Yamazu Zoe was definitely Yui's old classmate. That will go a long way toward tracking down her family.
けどすごいよ。まさか本当にユキちゃんだったなんて。
We were surprised, but it seemed to be Yui who was the most surprised of all. Her missing classmate had suddenly shown up at her home, and her brother and sister had brought her there. And she looked exactly the same as she had 6 years ago.
ウキちゃん、ちょっと話いいかい？
And she responded to Sakuma of all people, which is more than what Momose and Shinjo were able to do. She must have seen Dad's white coat and gotten nervous because she suddenly sat up straight.
何か遺伝的な病気とか言われたことは？成長が止まってしまうとか。
よくわかりません。すみません。
That's actually quite a reasonable answer.
じゃあ君の背が伸びなくなったのはいつか覚えているかな？ユイと同じクラスだった頃はどうだい？
Actually, come to think of it, the whole time she was down the facility, she wouldn't have known time unfolding in the outside world.
すみません。それもわかりません。でも、私、自信があってから、なんか変になって。
そうか。あの地震の後だね。
But hey, it seems to be working, so go Sakuma.
はい。
Finally getting some answers.
はあ、 やっぱり PTSD で成長ホルモンが、いや、あるいはターナー症候群みたいな染色体異常って可能性もあるが。
What is Turner syndrome, you ask? Well, we're about to find out. A chromosomal disorder found in women. Primary symptoms include delayed or absent development of secondary sexual characteristics, a lack of menstrual period, abnormally shaped organs, and decreased height. Interesting working hypothesis, but I don't think it entirely applies to Uki's condition here, Sakuma.
こればっかりは、しかるべきところでちゃんと検査をしなきゃわからんな。
Dad made some adjustments to her chart as he whispered to himself. The look on his face was far more serious than he usually let us see. That's because Sakuma, despite his usual manner, actually does care about his patients.
あのー、
And now it's Yuto's turn to speak with Uki. Yuto poked his head through the door. He must have been standing in the hallway the whole time and looking in on us.
ユウト、そろそろ行かないと学校遅刻するわよ。そうだよ、ユウ。大丈夫、すぐ行くよ。
He seemed a little scared by his sister's scolding. But he summoned up his courage and came inside, then stuck his hand out towards Uki.
これ、あげる。
In his hands was a tiny chocolate bar. It was the kind of chocolate you could buy in huge packs for cheap at the supermarket.
はい、ありがとうございます。こら、ユウ、ウキちゃんは年上なんだよ。そういう言い方はダメでしょ。
He's trying to make a friend.
年上？
Yuto looked very confused and a little unsatisfied. Yeah, it's all a bit strange.
どうしたの、ウキちゃん。はい、なんだか不思議な気分です。こういうことに慣れていないので。
Yeah, it's the first time you've actually had a normal interaction.
こういうことって？こうして家族が集まってみんなでお話ししたりです。
Yeah, you were kept in that facility for far too long.
君の家族はどうしたんだ？
Shinjo had said that she wouldn't tell him anything, but maybe in this environment she'd be more willing to talk.
私が小さい時に私を先生たちのところに置いて行ってしまいました。
They left you there. My eyes narrowed when I heard her say the doctors. She was probably talking about the scientists in that underground facility. And then she'd been a victim of their human experiments, just like Senri Minamisawa. But that begs the question, did her parents leave her there of their own volition? Or were they tricked? Or were they deceived? Why had her parents done something like so horrible to her?
君はそれからずっとあの地下施設に？
I would definitely say so.
はい。
And after a while, that became her only world, her only reality.
どうして、逃げなかったんだ？
Where exactly could she go?
お母さんに どこにも行くなと言われたので。そんなのひどい。
Ah, so her parents did deliberately leave her there. God damn it. Yui put her hand up to her mouth. I could feel the rage boiling over within me.
この子は僕と同じだ。
Her parents had ignored her ever since she was a small child, and eventually they just disappeared. But still, she wasn't able to get away from them.
君はあそこで実験の被害者。いや、みんなの世話をしていたけど、それはなぜ？
地震のせいです。
There was a sadness in her eyes as she remembered the people that had vanished.
地震で先生たちは病院からいなくなってしまいました。皆さんのお世話をしていた看護の人たちもです。だから代わりに私がお世話をするようにと病院から言われて。
学校はどうしたんだい？君が今着ているのは碧峰学園の制服だろ？年齢から考えて中等部に在籍してると思うんだが。
碧峰学園。
私たちが通ってる学校よ。ウキちゃんはうちの生徒なのよね。
But Uki shook her head. Yeah, she was very sheltered.
これお友達が着てたものです。
友達？
はじめ地下で皆さんのお世話をしていたのは私だけじゃなくて、もう一人同じ年くらいのお友達がいました。
Wait, there was someone else with you?
時々この服を着ていて、私可愛いねってずっと言ってたんです。
ああ、もしかしてその子、君と違って外から通ってきてた？
はい。
なるほど。碧峰の生徒だったのはそっちの子か。
彼女、最初は私と一緒にお仕事をしてたんですけど、だんだん具合が悪そうになって、お休みも多くなってきて、そしたらある日、これをプレゼントしてくれたんです。
So she gave her the uniform.
自分にはもう必要ないから、代わりに大切に着てねって。
Oh dear. Uki looked down at her shoes.
だから、このお洋服は私の大事な宝物です。いつも綺麗にして着ています。
So apparently, yeah, so the doctors and nurses who were actually running the experiments weren't actually there when we broke in the first time. But, you know, with that said, the hospital couldn't just evict those patients, could they? At least we're starting to see how it all ties together, at least for Uki. When I saw her expression, I understood. Her friend probably knew that she was dying. She'd been a victim of the same horrible experiments as Minamisawa and Uki and had gotten sick as a result.
それじゃあ、君が老人を連れて外を？
タクル。
Kurusu interrupted me gently.
一度にいろいろ聞くのはやめましょう。
あ、
That is true, but we do need to ask the important questions. Those are ones that matter.
ウキちゃん、辛いこともいっぱいあると思うし、また夜にでもね。
そうだよな。
Oh, we got this far.
それに、
Should
朝ごは
count
んだ
our
ってまだだもの
blessings.
ね。お腹すいたでしょ？いえ、私はそんな。
There was a cute little rumble from her tummy. She gasped a little in embarrassment and turned red.
父さんもそれでいいかしら。
ああ、なあ、ウキちゃん。このお姉ちゃんはちょっとおっかないが、飯だけはうまい。上で食べてくるといい。
父さん？
Kurusu pursed her lips as she took Uki's hand and stood up.
これチョコレートもう一個あげる。
And Uto with another present.
ありがとうございます。
As she left, Uto quickly gave her another piece of chocolate. At lunchtime, here at Hikio Academy once more, Ito and I were heading to the club room, most likely to continue ruminating about the case, but that is going to have to wait until the next episode. So when we return, adventurers, we shall, well, continue trying to put all the puzzle pieces together, even if it is incredibly convoluted. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.